The Black Hawk's rotors churned the desert air into a stinging sandstorm as Lieutenant Sophia Chun gripped her medical bag and prepared to jump into hell. Below, forward operating base Serpent's Tooth erupted in orange flashes incoming mortar, screamed overhead while tracer rounds painted deadly arcs across the twilight sky. The pilot shouted over the chaos, 30 seconds. This is as close as I can get. Sophia's boots hit the ground running. While the helicopter's crew chief dove for the nearest bunker, she sprinted directly toward the explosions, her compact frame cutting through the smoke like a blade. A mortar round detonated 20 meters to her left, showering her with debris, but she didn't even flinch. Her dark eyes scanned the battlefield with predatory focus, cataloging threats and calculating angles of approach that would keep her alive. The medical tent stood partially collapsed, its canvas walls shredded by shrapnel. Inside, chaos reigned. Wounded soldiers lay scattered across blood-soaked cots while an overwhelmed medic tried, desperately, to treat multiple casualties simultaneously. Sophia burst through the entrance just as Private Martinez began convulsing, bright arterial blood spurting from a severed femoral artery. He's bleeding out. The medic screamed, his hands slick with blood as he fumbled for clamps. Sophia dropped her bag and moved with fluid precision. Her fingers found the pressure point instantly, stemming the flow while her other hand retrieved surgical tools. Around them, mortar continued to fall. The tent shook with each impact, medical supplies cascading from overturned shelves. But Sophia's hands remained perfectly steady as she worked, her breathing controlled and rhythmic. "Clamp," she said quietly, her voice cutting through the pandemonium. The medic stared at her in amazement as she isolated the damaged vessel with surgical precision. Sutures. The blue ones. Her movements were economical, practiced, the work of someone who had performed emergency surgery under fire more times than she cared to remember. As she tied off the artery, another explosion rocked the tent. A support beam groaned overhead, threatening to collapse. The other medic cowered, but Sophia continued working, her concentration absolute. She had learned long ago to compartmentalize fear, to function in the space between heartbeats where death lived. "There," she said, stepping back as Martinez's vitals stabilized. "He'll live." The attack ended as suddenly as it had begun. In the sudden silence, Sophia became aware of eyes watching her. Sergeant Brooks, a mountain of a man with arms like tree trunks, stood in the tent's entrance. His face wore an expression of barely concealed disdain. "Well, well," he drawled, his voice thick with condescension. "Lucky you didn't faint at all that blood, sweetheart. Most girls would have been puking their guts up by now." The other soldiers who had gathered around began to chuckle. Corporal Williams, a wiry man with cruel eyes, added, "Yeah, good thing it was just beginner's luck. Wouldn't want you getting any ideas about being a real soldier." Sophia said nothing, but her fingers unconsciously traced the hidden skin beneath her left sleeve, a nervous habit from darker days when silence had meant survival. The intricate viper tattoo coiled around her forearm remained hidden beneath the fabric, its significance known only to a select few who operated in the world's deepest shadows. Captain Rodriguez emerged from the command bunker, his uniform pristine despite the attack. He was the kind of officer who led from behind, always finding reasons to be elsewhere when bullets started flying. His eye swept over the medical tent, taking in the scene with obvious displeasure. "Chun," he barked, not bothering with her rank. "What's your background? Where did they pull you from?" "Field medic training at Fort Sam Houston, sir," Sophia replied, her voice neutral. 3 years emergency medicine before enlisting. Rodriguez nodded dismissively. "Right. Well, this isn't some civilian hospital. This is a combat zone. I'm assigning you to inventory duty medical supplies, equipment maintenance, safe work. We can't have you getting overwhelmed when things get serious." Sergeant Brooks grinned. Smart thinking, Captain. Pretty girls like this one belong in the rear with the gear, not up front where the real work happens. The gathered soldiers erupted in laughter. Private Johnson, barely 19 and desperate to fit in, added, "Maybe she can organize our sock drawers too. I bet she's real good at folding things." Sophia's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but her expression remained neutral. She had endured worse mockery in places where showing weakness meant death. These men saw what they expected to see, a small woman, barely 5'4", with delicate features and soft hands. They couldn't see the calluses hidden beneath her gloves, earned from years of scaling walls and handling weapons. They couldn't see the scars that mapped her body like a roadmap of violence. Each one a story of survival against impossible odds. "Understood, sir," she said simply as the group began to disperse. Corporal Williams leaned close enough that she could smell the tobacco on his breath. "Word of advice, Princess. This ain't the place for playing soldier. Real combat isn't like whatever training exercise you barely passed. When the shooting starts, you better stay out of our way." Sophia met his gaze steadily, her dark eyes revealing nothing. "I'll keep that in mind." But as Williams walked away, laughing with his buddies, Sophia's fingers traced that hidden mark again. The Viper tattoo was more than just ink, it was a brand, a mark of membership in an organization that officially didn't exist. Only 12 people in the world bore that specific design, each one earned through trials that would break most soldiers before they even began. She thought of the last time someone had underestimated her. Colonel Nazir had made the same mistake, dismissing the little American girl who had infiltrated his compound. He had died with that same look of surprise on his face, never understanding how someone so small could move so fast, strike so precisely. The irony wasn't lost on her. These men, who prided themselves on being warriors, couldn't recognize a predator standing among them. They saw weakness where there was only controlled strength, inexperience where there was hard-earned expertise. They had no idea that the woman they were mocking had eliminated targets in 17 countries, that she had walked into enemy strongholds alone and emerged victorious as Sophia gathered her medical supplies. She caught fragments of conversation from outside the tent. Give her a week before she requests a transfer back to the rear. Hell, I give her 3 days before she's crying for her mommy. Command must be getting desperate, sending us babysitters instead of soldiers. Sophia allowed herself the ghost of a smile. Let them think what they wanted. Underestimation had always been her greatest weapon. While enemies focused on her apparent vulnerabilities, she studied their weaknesses, learned their patterns, waited for the perfect moment to strike. The Viper tattoo pulsed beneath her sleeve, a reminder of who she really was beneath this carefully constructed facade. Soon enough, these men would learn the truth. But for now, she would play the role they expected, the inexperienced medic who had gotten lucky. The pretty girl who belonged in the rear after all. The most dangerous predators were the ones you never saw coming. 3 days passed in a haze of inventory sheets and condescending smirks. Sophia had cataloged every bandage, counted every morphine vial, and endured countless jokes about her woman's work. But on the 4th morning, everything changed when Sergeant Brooks burst into the command tent, his face pale beneath his tan. "Sir, we've got a problem," he announced to Captain Rodriguez. Alpha Team missed their check-in. They were supposed to report from Checkpoint Bravo 2 hours ago. Rodriguez looked up from his coffee, annoyed at the interruption. Equipment malfunction. Radio probably took a hit from the dust storm last night. "Negative, sir. I've been monitoring all frequencies. Complete radio silence, and..." Brooks hesitated. Corporal Williams was leading that patrol. He's never missed a check-in, ever. The tent fell silent, except for the hum of generators outside. Sophia continued organizing medical supplies in the corner, but her ears were tuned to every word. 3 missing soldiers in hostile territory. The mathematics of survival were already calculating in her head. Could be they're pinned down, Rodriguez mused, but his voice lacked conviction. Or maybe they found something and went dark on purpose. Sir, Sophia spoke quietly from her corner. Permission to speak? Rodriguez barely glanced at her. What is it, Chun? The patrol route takes them through the coast valley. That's prime ambush territory, narrow passes, multiple escape routes for hostiles. If they're not responding, they're either dead or captured. Brooks snorted. Thanks for the tactical analysis, Florence Nightingale. Leave the thinking to the real soldiers. But something in Sophia's tone made Rodriguez pause. There was a certainty there, a cold professionalism that didn't match her supposed inexperience. How would you know about the tactical situation in Coast Valley? Sophia met his gaze steadily. I studied the terrain maps, the geological surveys. 6 months ago, insurgents used those same passes to ambush a supply convoy. 17 casualties. You memorized geological surveys? Rodriguez's eyebrows rose. Why? Because knowing the ground keeps people alive, sir. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them. Finally, Rodriguez turned back to Brooks. Assemble a search team. Take 8 men, full combat load. Find our people. Sir, Sophia said, standing slowly. Request permission to join the search team. The laughter that erupted from Brooks was harsh and immediate. Are you insane? This isn't a medical emergency, sweetheart. This is a combat mission. I'm a qualified soldier, Sergeant. And if they're wounded, you're a liability, Brooks cut her off. Dead weight that'll get real soldiers killed. The answer is no. Sophia's fingers traced her hidden tattoo, a gesture that was becoming more frequent as her patience wore thin. Sergeant, I've tracked insurgents through the Hindu Kush for 6 months. The tent went dead silent. Rodriguez's coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. What did you say? Before my medical assignment, I spent 6 months in the mountains. Tracking, surveillance, target acquisition. Each word was carefully chosen, revealing just enough truth to be useful without exposing too much. I know how they move, how they think. I can find your men. Brooks's face flushed red. Bullshit. You're a medic. A desk jockey with delusions of sergeant. Rodriguez's voice cut through the tirade like a blade. His eyes were fixed on Sophia with new interest. What unit were you with in the Hindu Kush? Sophia's pause was calculated, letting them see her reluctance to answer. That information is classified, sir. The words hung in the air like smoke. Rodriguez studied her face, searching for tells, for signs of deception. But Sophia had learned long ago to control every micro-expression, every involuntary response. Her face was a mask of professional composure. Fine, Rodriguez said finally. You can come, but you follow orders, you stay back, and if you slow us down, we leave you behind. Understood, sir. 2 hours later, Sophia found herself crammed into a Humvee with 7 soldiers who still saw her as a burden. The vehicle bounced and lurched over the rocky terrain as they approached the last known position of Alpha Team. Brooks rode shotgun, his M4 carbine ready, while the others checked their weapons with the nervous energy of men heading into danger. Remember, Brooks called back to the team. We're looking for 3 of our own. Williams, Martinez, and Jackson. They could be wounded, they could be captured, or they could be dead. Stay sharp, watch your sectors, and don't do anything stupid. His eyes found Sophia in the rearview mirror. That especially goes for you, Princess. Sophia said nothing, but her mind was already working. The terrain ahead was a maze of rocky outcroppings and narrow defiles perfect for ambushes, but also perfect for someone who knew how to read the signs. As they approached the checkpoint, She began to see what the others missed. "Stop the vehicle," she said quietly. "What?" Brooks turned around. "We're not even at the checkpoint yet." "Stop the vehicle," Sophia repeated, a voice carrying an authority that made the driver's foot move to the brake. Before he consciously decided to obey, the Humvee rolled to a halt. Sophia was out before it fully stopped, moving toward a cluster of rocks with purposeful strides. The others followed reluctantly, weapons ready but confused. "There," Sophia pointed to what looked like empty ground. "Scuff marks in the dirt. Boot prints, but they're wrong." "Wrong how?" Rodriguez demanded. Sophia knelt beside the marks, her fingers hovering just above the disturbed earth. "The stride length is too short for Williams. He's 6'2", long legs. And the tread pattern." She looked up at them. "These are local boots. Insurgent footwear." Brooks squinted at the ground, seeing nothing but dirt and rocks. "You're seeing things." But Sophia was already moving, following a trail invisible to the others. She led them up a rocky slope, pausing occasionally to examine broken twigs, displaced stones, patterns in the dust that told a story of violence and capture. "Here," she said, stopping beside a boulder. "Blood spatter. And look at this." She pointed to a series of gouges in the rock. "Drag marks." They were taken alive. The soldiers exchanged glances. Even Brooks was beginning to look uncertain. "How can you possibly know all that from some scratches on a rock?" Sophia's eyes were cold as winter steel. "Because I've seen it before. Many times." She continued up the slope, her movements fluid and silent. The others crashed through the underbrush behind her, but Sophia moved like smoke, reading the terrain with an expertise that spoke of years in hostile territory. Finally, she stopped at the edge of a cliff overlooking a hidden valley. "There," she whispered, pointing to a cave complex carved into the opposite cliff face. "That's where they are." Through binoculars, Rodriguez could make out movement near the cave entrance. Armed figures in local dress, and something else. 3 forms bound near the cave mouth. "Jesus Christ," he breathed. "How did you know?" Sophia was already studying the approaches, calculating angles of attack and escape routes. "Because this is what they do. Take prisoners to isolated locations, use them as bait for rescue attempts. It's a standard tactic. So what's the plan?" Brooks asked, his earlier mockery replaced by grudging respect. Sophia's smile was sharp as a blade. "We give them what they're expecting. A rescue attempt. But not the kind they're prepared for." As she began outlining her plan, the soldiers realized they were seeing a completely different person than the quiet medic they had dismissed. This woman spoke with the authority of someone who had planned operations in the world's most dangerous places, who had turned the hunter into the hunted more times than they could imagine. The viper was beginning to show her fangs. The rescue mission had been a masterpiece of precision warfare. While Brooks and his team created a noisy diversion at the cave's main entrance, Sophia had simply vanished into the shadows. 20 minutes later, she emerged from the darkness like a wraith, leading the 3 rescued soldiers to safety. 2 insurgent guards lay unconscious behind her, their weapons confiscated, their positions compromised without a single shot being fired. "How the hell did you get past their sentries?" Rodriguez had demanded during the debrief. Sophia's answer had been maddeningly simple. "I went around them." But it was the way she said it with the casual confidence of someone discussing the weather that made the hair on the back of Rodriguez's neck stand up. No one moved that quietly, that efficiently, without extensive training. The kind of training that didn't appear on standard military records. Now, a week later, the base buzzed with nervous energy. General Marcus Harrison was arriving for an unscheduled inspection, and everyone knew that unscheduled visits from 2-star generals meant someone was in serious trouble. Rodriguez had spent the morning polishing his boots and rehearsing, explanations for the recent insurgent activity in their sector. The general's helicopter touched down at precisely 1400 hours, kicking up a cloud of dust that sent soldiers scrambling to secure loose equipment. Harrison emerged from the aircraft like a force of nature, tall, silver-haired, with the kind of presence that made junior officers check their uniform buttons twice. His aide, a nervous captain with wire-rimmed glasses, struggled to keep pace as the general strode toward the command tent. "Gentlemen," Harrison's voice carried the authority of 3 decades in uniform. "I'm here because Langley has some concerns about insurgent infiltration in this sector. Intelligence suggests we may have a leak." The assembled officers shifted uncomfortably. Rodriguez felt sweat beating on his forehead, despite the air conditioning. "Sir, we've had some recent activity, but nothing to suggest." "Captain Rodriguez," Harrison cut him off. "I'm not here to listen to excuses. I'm here for facts." "Who's your intelligence officer?" "That would be Lieutenant Chun, sir. She's been handling our tactical assessments since her arrival." Harrison's eyes swept the room until they found Sophia, who stood quietly near the back wall. "Lieutenant Chun, step forward." Sophia moved with that same fluid grace that had puzzled Rodriguez since her arrival. She positioned herself at attention before the general, her posture perfect, her expression neutral. "Sir, I've read some interesting reports about your recent activities, Lieutenant. Successful rescue operation, accurate threat assessments. Impressive work for someone fresh out of medical training." "Thank you, sir." Harrison gestured toward the tactical map spread across the central table. "Walk me through your analysis of insurgent movement patterns in this sector." Sophia approached the map with confident strides. As she began her briefing, her expertise became immediately apparent. She spoke with the fluency of someone who understood not just tactics, but the psychology of asymmetric warfare. Her analysis was sophisticated, nuanced, revealing patterns that others had missed. "The insurgents are using a 3-cell structure," she explained, pointing to various locations on the map. "Primary cell handles reconnaissance, secondary cell manages logistics, and the tertiary cell executes operations. But they're not operating independently. There's coordination happening at a level that suggests outside training." Harrison nodded approvingly. "Foreign advisors?" "Possibly. The tactical sophistication has increased dramatically over the past month. Someone with advanced military training is teaching them counter-surveillance techniques." As Sophia reached across the table to indicate another position on the map, her sleeve caught on the corner of a metal clipboard. The fabric pulled back, revealing several inches of her left forearm and the intricate black ink that coiled around. Her skin like living shadow. General's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. The tattoo was unmistakable, a viper in mid-strike, its fangs bared, its body forming an infinity symbol around a stylized dagger. But it wasn't just any tattoo. Harrison had seen that exact design only once before in a classified briefing about units that officially didn't exist. "Lieutenant Chun," his voice was carefully controlled. "A word, outside." Sophia's eyes met his for a fraction of a second, and in that moment, Harrison saw something that confirmed his suspicions. There was no surprise in her gaze, no confusion about why he wanted to speak privately. Only the calm assessment of a professional who had been expecting this moment. They walked in silence to a position well away from the command tent, where the desert wind would carry their words away from listening ears. Harrison waited until they were completely alone before speaking. "Show me your arm." Sophia hesitated for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to maintain the pretense, short enough to avoid insubordination. She rolled up her sleeve, revealing the full tattoo in all its deadly beauty. The viper seemed to move in the shifting light, its scales rendered with photographic precision, its eyes holding an intelligence that was almost unsettling. "Shadow Unit 7, Harrison said quietly. That unit doesn't exist. Sir, Sophia's response was automatic. The standard denial drilled into every operator. No, it doesn't. Harrison's smile was grim. Officially. But I was briefed on its existence 3 years ago when I was assigned to Joint Special Operations Command. 12 operators. 12 tattoos. 12 ghosts who handle the missions that can't be acknowledged. Sophia said nothing, but her posture had shifted subtly. The deferential stance of a junior officer was gone, replaced by the coiled readiness of a predator. Harrison recognized the change. He had seen it in other elite operators when their covers were blown. "Agent Viper," he said, using the call sign he had memorized from classified files. "The woman who eliminated the Kandahar cell, who infiltrated the Peshawar compound, who walked into Colonel Nazir's stronghold and walked out alone while his entire command structure burned behind her." Sophia's eyes were winter-cold now, all pretense abandoned. "Sir, I don't know what you're talking about." But her confirmation was in the way she moved, the way she automatically scanned for exits and threats, the way her hand positioned itself near where a concealed weapon would be hidden. Harrison had spent enough time around special operations personnel to recognize the signs. "Relax, Agent. Your cover isn't blown. But I need to understand why one of our most valuable assets is playing medic at a forward operating base in Afghanistan." For a long moment, Sophia studied his face, weighing options, calculating risks. Finally, she spoke. "Sometimes the best place to hide is in plain sight, sir. And sometimes the mission requires being underestimated." "What mission?" Sophia's smile was sharp as a blade. "The one where we find out who's been feeding intelligence to the insurgents." "The leak you mentioned?" "It's not theoretical, General. It's real, it's active, and it's someone on this base." Harrison felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert wind. "You're saying we have a traitor." "I'm saying you have a traitor, sir. And he's been very careful, very clever, but not careful enough." Sophia's fingers traced the Viper tattoo, a gesture Harrison now understood was pure predatory instinct. He thinks he's hunting sheep. He has no idea there's a viper in the flock. The general looked back toward the command tent, where Rodriguez and his officers were probably wondering what was taking so long. "How long have you known?" "Since the second day. The attack patterns, the timing, the precision of their intelligence. Someone's been feeding them detailed information about our operations. I've been gathering evidence, building a case. And now?" Sophia's eyes glittered with deadly promise. "Now it's time for the Viper to strike." As they walked back toward the command tent, Harrison realized that everything was about to change. The quiet medic who had been dismissed and mocked was actually one of the military's most lethal weapons. And somewhere on this base, a traitor was about to discover that he had gravely underestimated his prey. The hunt was about to become very interesting indeed. The attack came at 0347 hours, just as Sophia had predicted it would. She had spent the evening after her conversation with General Harrison, positioning herself in the communications bunker, ostensibly updating medical inventory reports. But her real purpose was surveillance watching, waiting and recording every transmission that went out from the base. The traitor would have to communicate the general's arrival to his handlers. And when he did, Sophia would be ready at 0200 hours. She had seen Captain Rodriguez slip into the communications tent, claiming he needed to file a routine status report. But Sophia's enhanced hearing trained through years of covert operations had caught fragments of his whispered conversation. Grid coordinates, troop positions, the general's planned departure time. Now, as mortar began falling with surgical precision on the base's most critical infrastructure, Sophia moved through the chaos like a shadow given form. While others scrambled for defensive positions, she had a different objective: the communications bunker. The ammunition depot. The places where a saboteur could do maximum damage, while everyone else was distracted. Explosions lit the night sky in brilliant orange flashes. The insurgents had positioned themselves perfectly. They knew exactly where to hit for maximum effect. The motor pool erupted in flames as RPGs found their targets with impossible accuracy. The main generator complex went dark, plunging half the base into blackness. "This is too coordinated," General Harrison shouted over the din as he and his aide took cover behind concrete barriers. "They know our defensive positions." Sophia appeared beside him like a ghost, her medical bag replaced by tactical gear that seemed to materialize from nowhere. "Sir, I need you to keep everyone focused on the perimeter. Don't let anyone fall back to the interior positions." "What are you?" "Trust me, sir. The real threat isn't outside the wire." Before Harrison could respond, Sophia had vanished again, moving with the fluid grace of someone who had learned to navigate battlefields in complete darkness. She scaled the communications tower with spider-like agility. Her small frame an advantage as she climbed the metal framework while explosions shook the structure. From her elevated position, she could see the entire base laid out below. The insurgent attack was perfectly orchestrated, too perfect. They were hitting targets in a sequence that suggested intimate knowledge of the base's vulnerabilities. But more importantly, she could see movement near the ammunition depot that didn't match the defensive patterns. A cottoners. Lone figure was making his way toward the explosive storage, moving with the confidence of someone who belonged there. Even in the darkness, Sophia recognized the silhouette. Captain Rodriguez. She dropped from the tower, landing silently in the shadows behind the medical tent. A movement through the base was like liquid mercury flowing around obstacles, invisible to the soldiers focused on the external threat. Years of training in urban warfare and close-quarters combat had taught her to become one with the darkness. The ammunition depot was a hardened concrete structure designed to contain explosions and protect the base's ordnance from enemy fire. But it wasn't designed to keep out someone with legitimate access. Rodriguez was already inside when Sophia reached the perimeter, his silhouette visible through the reinforced windows as he worked by the light of a small, tactical flashlight. Sophia circled the building like a hunting cat, studying angles of approach and escape routes. Through a ventilation grate, she could hear Rodriguez speaking in urgent whispers into a radio. "Package is in position," he was saying. "Detonation in 60 seconds. Make sure your people are clear of the blast radius." Sophia's blood turned to ice. He wasn't just feeding intelligence to the enemy. He was about to destroy the base's entire ammunition supply. The explosion would level half the compound and kill dozens of soldiers. She moved. The ventilation grate came away silently under her practiced hands. Sophia slithered through the opening like her namesake, dropping into the depot's interior without making a sound. Rodriguez was hunched over a complex array of explosives, his back to her position, completely focused on his sabotage. 45 seconds, he muttered into his radio. "Tell them to hit the fuel depot next. Maximum casualties." Sophia rose from the shadows behind him like a nightmare given form. "The Viper sends her regards." Rodriguez spun around, his eyes wide with shock and terror. The radio fell from his nerveless fingers as he found himself staring into the face of death itself. Sophia's expression was calm, almost serene, but her eyes held the cold promise of violence. "You," he gasped. "But you're just a medic. You're nobody." Sophia's smile was sharp as a blade. "That's what they all think. Right up until the end." Rodriguez lunged for his sidearm, but Sophia moved with inhuman speed. Her hand clamped over his wrist like a steel trap, while her other hand found the pressure point at his neck. He dropped like a stone, unconscious before he hit the ground. The timer on his explosive device showed 30 seconds. Sophia's training took over, her mind shifting into the hyper-focused state that had kept her alive through dozens of impossible missions. Her fingers flew over the device, identifying components, tracing wiring patterns, searching for the disarm sequence. 20 seconds. 15. 10. With 5 seconds remaining, she found the master circuit and severed it with her combat knife. The timer froze, the red numbers glowing mockingly in the darkness. The external attack was already winding down as Sophia emerged from the ammunition depot, dragging Rodriguez's unconscious form behind her. The insurgents had achieved their primary objective, or so they thought. They had no way of knowing their inside man had been compromised. General Harrison was coordinating the base's response from the command bunker when Sophia appeared in the doorway, Rodriguez's limp form at her feet. The assembled officers stared in shock at the scene, their commanding officer unconscious, and the quiet medic standing over him with the cold efficiency of a professional killer. "General," Sophia's voice cut through the stunned silence. "I present your traitor, Rodriguez?" Sergeant Brooks's voice cracked with disbelief. "That's impossible. He's been with us for 2 years. Sophia reached into Rodriguez's pocket and withdrew a satellite phone military grade, but not standard issue. He's been feeding intelligence to insurgent cells for at least 6 months. Troop movements, patrol routes, defensive positions. Tonight he tried to destroy our ammunition depot from the inside." She tossed a small device onto the table, the timer from Rodriguez's bomb. This was set to detonate during the attack. Would have taken out half the base. General Harrison studied the evidence, his face grim. "How long have you known?" "Since the rescue mission. The insurgents knew exactly where to position their ambush, exactly how many men we would send. Someone had given them our standard operating procedures." Sophia's eyes were cold as winter steel. "I've been building a case ever since. And tonight?" "Tonight I watched him transmit our defensive positions to his handlers. Then I followed him to the ammunition depot and stopped him from completing his mission." The silence in the bunker was deafening. Finally, Brooks found his voice. "Who are you, really?" Sophia looked around the room at the faces of men who had mocked her, dismissed her, treated her like a liability. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had operated in the world's darkest corners. "I'm Agent Viper. Shadow Unit 7. I've eliminated terrorist cells in 17 countries. I've infiltrated organizations that most people don't even know exist. And for the past 2 weeks, I've been protecting all of you from a threat you never saw coming." She rolled up her sleeve, revealing the intricate viper tattoo in all its deadly beauty. "You underestimated me because I'm small, because I'm a woman, because I let you think I was weak. But that's what makes me dangerous. I'm the predator you never see coming." General Harrison stepped forward, his voice carrying new respect. "Ladies and gentlemen, meet one of our military's most valuable assets. The woman who just saved all our lives." As dawn broke over the base, the soldiers who had once mocked Sophia now understood the truth. They had been living alongside a legend, a ghost who walked among them, protecting them from threats they couldn't even imagine. The viper had finally revealed her fangs, and the prey had become the hunter.